there has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch, Michael by there.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Oh, of course, though, this is a special edition called the Law and Crime Author Series. And today we have the privilege of having heavy-duty veteran James Disser, who's worked in numerous police departments in Michigan. And I can't imagine, having been on the NYPD for 27 years, having changed police departments 3 times over my career. That would have been a little bit unsettling to me. Anyway, Jim wrote a book, of course, called Echoes in Eternity, and that's why Jim is on the show. I'm going to read the foreword to his book. We'll get a little idea of who Jim is, and then we'll introduce him. You can see him. He's on the screen. He's not an imposter. And we'll get an idea of what made him write this book and the experiences that he had over 30-plus year career in law enforcement. All victories result from teamwork. Throughout history, in wartime and peace, success has been a team effort. It's true in military and civilian life, sports, business, relationships, anything you can name, and it certainly applies to law enforcement. All the exciting, significant, and worthwhile moments I've experienced in my career happened because of other people who were present for me when I needed them. The concept of sharing is first taught to us by our parents, and mine certainly impressed that concept upon my sister and me. From childhood to adulthood, I was shown the importance of working toward common goals by teachers, scoutmasters, coaches, mentors, and ultimately the leaders I encountered as a young policeman. As I wrote this book, it dawned on me that it's not a journal of my career accomplishments, but a testament to the people I've worked with and what we accomplished together. For that reason, I decided to celebrate them and describe their contributions and character throughout this narrative. Perhaps the most significant of those contributions came from my dad, a 33-year police veteran who accomplished so many great things in his career. As a young kid, I believe his was the most important job in the whole world. And I still remember him asking him, "Did you catch any bad guys today, Dad?" when he came home from work. He never said a single word to me about becoming a cop, but all those Tuesday nights together spent watching the TV show Adam 12, probably in short, he never had to. It was the only job I ever wanted. While addressing his cavalry officers just before a battle in the epic film Gladiator, Russell Crowe's Maximus says, "What we do in life echoes in eternity." I believe that. My hope is that these true stories and the people who lived them will be remembered. This is Jim Disser's words, his introduction. During my law enforcement career in Michigan, I spent 15 years employed by the City of Mount Clemens Police Department and 16 years with the City of Marysville Police Department. I also served a short time with the Grand Rapids Police Department. I had many assignments, including road patrol, SWAT, narcotics, and the Major Crimes Division. Jim Disser, it's my pleasure to invite you to the show. I'm excited. I mean, you seem to have had an extremely eclectic career. Now, Jim, as I said earlier on before we went on the air, you got the floor.
Hey, thanks, Bill. I really appreciate this opportunity, man. I really do. I have goosebumps on my arm. I've never heard anybody read that out loud before. That was fantastic. And the opening to your show with all the video from New York City, that's amazing. So thanks for having me.
Jim, it's my pleasure. You know something? One of the things that you said, and it's so true in policing, is that sometimes you work with people on the police department that are strangers to you, yet that person will risk their life to save yours. Unbelievable, right? What other profession other than maybe the armed services would do that?
I can't think of one. Maybe a fire department. I don't know what they do, but you're absolutely right. I worked with people that I didn't know as well as others. I think looking back on it, what I really took was that I was fortunate. I had great leadership. I had guys and gals like that, like you described, that would lay down their life for each other. And, I had also, I had some examples of what not to do. We all had that, and I remember my dad telling me to learn from those people too. And I did. So like I said in the book, it's the only job I ever wanted. 31 years went by like that. And I really was in an environment that was a target-rich environment for stories. And that's how this book ultimately came about. I remember being a rookie cop, getting off duty at midnight and going to the bar for an hour and a half with the guys. And I'd listen to the city cops and the deputies and the troopers sit around the table and tell stories. I didn't really have too many of my own just yet, but I really enjoyed listening to them. And I learned from them. Sometimes I learned mistakes not to make. I avoided those mistakes because I heard these guys talk about it. And in that environment, pretty soon I had some of my own stories to tell. And over the years, more and more, people seemed to like it when I told them. So at the end of my career, I started thinking about it. I got some encouragement from another cop who had written a book and knew that I wanted to do it. So he kept prodding me. Finally, I did it. And the first 10 chapters, each chapter being a different story, roughly chronological, but each chapter is a different story. So it's easy to pick up and put down. The first 10 chapters just came flowing out of me like water. I couldn't write them fast enough, I guess. And the next 10 were similar, a little different, but still going great. The next 5 or so were kind of a labor. So I put it down for 6 months, didn't touch it. And then I picked it up, started writing them again one by one, asked my buddy John, the author, hey, when do I stop? And he says, well, how many words do you have? I said, no idea. He goes, well, Microsoft Word counts them. Check. Oh, okay. 82,500. He's like, you might want to stop because in a book of that size, that equates to about 300 pages, and you don't want to be over that. So it ended up being 325. So that was the right place to stop. I've got plenty more, and I think what I'd like to do next is develop a fictional character, the kind of guy that we like, like Harry Bosch or Andy Sipowicz or Travis McGee, something like that, and develop the storyline, but then let my own experiences kind of inform that story. That's kind of my rough draft for what I want to do next.
Jim, in college, I took a course when I went to Buffalo State College called Detective Film. And it goes all the way back to Charlie Chan and, all of those early detectives. And it was about Warner Oland. And I'm trying to think of some of these, Sherlock Holmes, of course. And that's like a genre of film. And when you think about even films to this day, there is such a focus on police work and what Hollywood thinks police work is, which is so different.
Isn't that something?
Than what we actually know. Look, you watch some of those old Dirty Harry films with Clint Eastwood, and we all wish policing could be like that,
Yeah.
But it's amazing to watch. And, I even sometimes when I watch, I'm not a big fan of these shows that just try to Blue Bloods. I don't know. I always feel that the writers have to insert their political bullshit into these shows that, look, there's always this left-leaning writers that have to put this crap in there. And as soon as they do that, I'm like, I'm done watching this. I can't watch this.
Same here. Actually, that's one of the shows that I watch. And I'll say, 50-50. I'll be watching Blue Bloods and I'll get 5 minutes into it and just go click, turn it off because the storyline that week is one of like you just described. Other times it's better. But isn't it funny that in a society that it seems like has such a significant portion of it that dislikes us, that everybody's so fascinated with police shows on TV and movies and stuff like that. It's kind of weird.
Well, early on as a kid, I watched, of course, we probably all saw it, Serpico. And someone asked him in the movie, why did you become a cop? And he says, I'll tell you why. He goes, because I would look inside a building and all these cops were in there and no one knew what happened, but they knew. And he goes, and that's why I became a cop. I wanted to know what was inside those crime scenes, what was inside those closed doors. And it's true, as a cop, there's an expression on the NYPD, it's a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. And of course, that was stolen from Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, but it happens to be true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I couldn't think of anything. I as a little kid, I couldn't articulate it, but I knew that to me, that was the most important job in the world. And my dad had it, and I still think that. I still think it is, with all the troubles and all of that and all the other great things that we need in our society to function as a society. all the business and the industry and the medicine and all of that is equally important. But without the cops, it's going to be chaos. It's going to be anarchy. It's going to be madness. And man, I feel like we're sliding in that direction a little bit right now. But that's, to me, that's why it's always been the most important job in the world.
I agree with you. And I mean, look, I've been out for 12 years. October 31st will be 12 years. I did almost 27. And my last 16, I was a sergeant in the detective bureau. And my last 10, I was a sergeant in Manhattan North Homicide Squad. And I loved the job. But near the end, I started loving it a little less. And there's an old NYPD expression. I'll give you another one. This is a great one. I don't know who invented it. They said, "You love the job, but the job doesn't love you back." I said, that's great.
Man, yeah, that's so interesting that you say that, because I tell young people that sometimes when they ask me about, what should I study in school? Should I be a criminal justice major? I say, hey, first of all, if being a cop is just burning a hole in your chest and you're not going to be happy unless you do it, by all means, please do it. I'll help you. Just call me out, whatever I can do for you. Let me know. But if you're looking at it because you think it has a good pension or something, which most of them don't anymore, don't do it for that reason. As per school, I said, think about studying something that interests you or something that's useful, like accounting or, psychology, something like that. Because if you go criminal justice, and here's what made me think of it. I say to them, if you go criminal justice and you get in the job and you find out that you don't like the job or the job doesn't like you, what do you got then? You got 4 years and $100,000 that you spend on something that you can't even use. So you might as well study something else. And trust me, when you get to the police department, they're going to be thrilled that you have that degree, and they're not going to care what it's saying. They're not, So, but it's interesting. I use that same phrase myself.
Jim, one of the things that really, when you talk about the police service, is the eclectic nature of the human beings that go on the police service. And I see guys on the NYPD. First of all, the NYPD is probably not a good example because at one time there's almost 40,000 cops. Now there's about 34,000, 35,000. But so you really have a cross section of the population. And you see people, we used to say, this guy figured the job out day one. He doesn't do shit, There's people like that immediately go to school, get a law degree, all while answering phones or whatever they're doing,
And then they get promoted.
They're great. Anyone that goes through law school, for some reason, is a great test taker. They just have that. They have studying down. You're right. Or they'll lay in the police academy for 15 years and go from cop to captain. And then it's like, I'm really going to coast. I'm going to get my law degree, and at 20 or 25, I'm going to quit this job and go right into a law practice.
Yeah, there's definitely a what I call a warrior class in the police department, and it doesn't matter if you are male or female, white or black, or in between, short or tall, big or small. If you're either warrior or you're not. If I know that you're coming for me, if I'm in trouble, we're going to get along fine. We don't even have to really like each other personally. But if I know that and I'm coming for you, then we're going to have that relationship. And that's that warrior class I refer to in the police department. And I'm sure that, on a 40,000 man department or on a 40-man department, the percentage is probably the same. It's probably less than half that are like us. But I told my wife this morning, I said, I told her about coming on with you. And I said, man, I'm going on with this guy NYPD, Manhattan North Homicide, man. That to me, that just rings my bell, man. I would love to hear all your stories,
Jim, like you mentioned that, and it's a great point, and I want to focus on what you were saying. There's the warrior, and then there's the civil servant. And the brass and the public, they really believe that they want the civil servant, the service person, but real cops, we want the warrior. Because we want someone that's going to save our life when needed. And the public really, look, when there's an active shooter, do you want the civil servant? Do you want the community policing type cop? No, you want the warrior. When someone's robbing you, when someone puts a knife to you, do you want the community policing guy who's going to, talk to you after the fact? Or do you want the warrior? Do you want Maximus to show up?
Yeah. I think much of the public, whether they know it or not, despite of their, despite their protests and their comments to the contrary, they want us to be the police sometimes. You show up and you have to bring order to chaos. And if they're, standing on their stoop in their neighborhood and there's a shootout going out front, it doesn't matter what their thoughts are in other moments. In that moment, they want us to be the police and to lay it down. And if you drive all of those guys out, guys and girls, because there's plenty of women that are just like that too, you drive them out, what do you got now? Trouble,
Jim, 100%. I want to get to your book, and one of the first chapters, and you've, as I said earlier on, you had a very eclectic career, and
sure
you
did.
guys call it SWAT. On the NYPD, we call it emergency service, and there's an old expression on the police department. I have a million of these expressions, and I'm not even writing a book. They say,
I love it.
When a civilian needs help, they call the police. When a cop needs help, he calls ESU. Da, 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 da,
Right.
And that's like,
Yeah.
ESU cops will show up on the scene, and I, as a boss, I would always repeat that to them, and they get a big smile on their face. I'd say, when a civilian needs help, they call the police. When the cops need help, we call the, and they would be like,
that's right, man. Well, I know all about emergency service unit and about LAPD SWAT. When in the 90s, when I was coming up, man, it was like, that's all I wanted. I thought that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to work SWAT and I wanted to work undercover narcotics, those two things. And I got to do them both for years. But over time, looking back on it, you're right. There's lots of, SWAT was awesome. I loved it. And I'm proud to have helped bring that unit to its current level. But yeah, there's some, even buddies of mine, they're kind of meatheads that they ate that stuff up, that they were 911 for the cops and all that kind of stuff. But it's true.
Jim, I'm going to say something that's going to get me in trouble in the cop world. But a SWAT guy or an ESU guy is really a fireman with a gun.
Oh, man.
They're going to hate
that
me.
part.
They do a lot of the same stuff. They save people.
Yeah.
They rescue people, right? It's sort of the same job in a lot of ways. And, of course, an ESU guy, they used to get battles with the FDNY or ESU, and it was all over territorial bullshit that most of us didn't care about.
I think ESU is a little bit different than most SWAT teams nationwide in that they do that. They're so diverse in their training and their experience, and they're, climbing the Brooklyn Bridge to rescue jumpers, and most SWAT teams don't do that, but they do. And I know that I've seen some of their equipment. They roll up in trucks that kind of look like fire trucks because they need the ladders and all that stuff.
Right.
So impressive.
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. So give me a good war story from your SWAT days.
From the SWAT days, well, that list is long, but it was. We were called out to a place on Canfield Street. I even remember the address. I won't say it, but Canfield Street in Mount Clemens for reports of shots fired. And this is a working class neighborhood. Most of the houses are, 1-story, 1,400 square foot ranches type of deal. But yards are nice. Everybody's working, keeps their property nice, and it's a good working class neighborhood. So when shots fired call comes out. That's highly unusual in this neighborhood. Cops got there, a lieutenant and a brand new junior patrolman and another guy rolled up. And first thing they see is a large man, 6'5", 250 pounds at least, stumbling out of the side of this house, face down on the front lawn. Boom, he's out. And as they approach, focused on him and the blood that's coming out of him, they hear shots being fired in the house. And right away, this whole thing just gets ramped up 100%. So there was a hospital about 2.5 blocks away. They loaded this guy up in the backseat of the scout car, communicated on the radio to what was going on, but their first priority was to get this guy to the hospital. They do. Unfortunately, he's gone. He's been shot multiple times in the chest, and he dies. So almost immediately, SWAT team is called out. And this is in the middle of the day on a Sunday, by the way. It was partly sunny, 60 degrees, bright sunshine, or a bright light of day, so to speak. So we get there, and the first thing they do, of course, is they send out a scout sniper team that's going to set up observation posts. Tough to do in this neighborhood because it's such close quarters, but they ended up getting a second floor window on a house across the street. Same thing on the block behind it. They were able to set up some coverage for us. And our team rolled up, established a command post. I'm jumping forward here an hour or two, but we sent out both of our entry teams, front and rear. I was the team leader on one of those entry teams, and we were in the back of the house. And we're looking at a back door. You go into this is common construction in Michigan. You go in the back door. There's a steps leading down to the basement, 3 steps leading up into the kitchen. And so we're posted outside while negotiators are trying to reach this guy. They can't. They're calling numbers. They can't get them. They're using bullhorns. Nothing. They said to us, "Hey, we want your team to insert a throw phone," which I know that you know what that is, but maybe some people might not. It's a phone. It looks like a regular landline phone. It's connected, by a very long line to us, and you insert it. It has a speaker on it, so even if it's not being used, you can listen to what's going on. I don't even know if they still use them. This was, in the early 2000s. Maybe they got something better now, but we were tasked with inserting the throw phone. So second guy in the stack with me, Mark Bratton, we decide we're gonna move up to the back door. Don't need to breach the door because the inside heavy door is open. It's just a screen door, and he's gonna pull it back, and I'm gonna throw this phone in. And we decided that we're gonna put it in the basement because the negotiators had decided that's probably where this guy was. So we let everybody know what we're doing. Snipers got our coverage. My entry team's watching too, watching all the windows. We make a quick but careful approach. I make eye contact with Bratton. He nods, opens the door, and I reached back and I stepped into this doorway to deliver this phone. And right about there, that's when I saw the guy. He was at the bottom of the stairs, so maybe 15 feet away. He was seated on the tile floor, clearly deceased. He had just a massive gunshot wound to the right side of his head. And there was a woman in front of him who was also deceased, clearly, massive gunshot wound to the head. And she was seated in front of him with her back to him. So it looked like he had killed her, positioned her, and then shot himself. And in fact, that's what he did. And there was a large caliber revolver laying on the floor next to them. And unfortunately, I couldn't stop my throwing motion. So I kept going. And as the phone goes in, it hits this guy's body in the shoulder, goes clattering across the floor. Bratton reaches in, grabs the strap on the back of my vest, and pulls me out of the doorway because I had some momentum going. And we immediately radio to the command post what we saw, what we did, and we need to make entry because there's at least one more person unaccounted for. I should mention, just as let me back up for 1 second, how this developed was a man and his wife were getting divorced. She was divorcing him, and she got the house, and he didn't, he was not happy. He was very, very upset, very disgruntled, very angry, very emotional in the days and weeks leading up to this. And on this particular day, she had shown up with her sister and brother-in-law to retrieve some items that she had in the house, and she's moving out. And the man who died in the front yard was her brother-in-law. And so he's deceased. These two are deceased. Where's the sister? We got to go. So after just, 90 seconds or so of communication and prep, we made simultaneous entry. My team went through the back door, which we had just been at, and then the other team went through the front door. We went in the basement. They cleared the main floor. So in we go, down we go. Bratton's in front of me. We have to step over these people, and to describe it as, blood and guts kind of a scene was an understatement. It was pretty bad. But we saw some bloody footprints leading from where these bodies were to a doorway, coming from that door actually to where they were. So we headed that way, stacked up, went through the doorway, and it was a laundry room. It was a long rectangular room. We had to make about a 270-degree turn. We see the washing machine, the shelving and so forth like that, basement windows up above. And there she is. The sister-in-law was also deceased from a gunshot wound to the head, and she was laying on the floor. So we quickly cleared the rest of the house. And this is obviously a SWAT call at the head. Ultimately, as you know, we strive to resolve incidents peacefully. every single time if we can. We don't want any kind of violence involved at all. But this one was extraordinarily violent and had a sad ending, and we weren't able to do much about it. But so it ended up being a triple murder suicide on a beautiful Sunday afternoon.
You know, Jim, that's the kind of stories, that's the kind of scenes that stay with you for the rest of your life. And a stockbroker is never going to see that. Someone in computers is never going to see something like that. So when you do see something like that, it does have an effect on you. And it may not, you walk away that day and maybe after work you say, let's go out for a couple of beers just to talk about this.
We did.
Yeah. And we have a doctor who works a lot with the NYPD, Dr. Stephen Washkel. He's actually sort of famous in the world of policing and suicide. And I had him on the show a bunch of times, and I said, Doc, when you see something horrific like that, is it okay to go out like drinking and stuff like that? He goes, absolutely. That's probably the best thing you can do. He goes, as long as you keep drinking for the whole week. He goes, but if you want to go out with your buddies and talk about it, that's one of the healthiest things you can do. And that's why, Jim, and I know you know this, that suicide is such a huge problem in the policing service, because many people, I don't think they bargain for what they're going to see during their 20 years, 25, 30 years on the job. And unless you have healthy outlets to sort of as a diversion toward that, a good family life, you work out, you have healthy hobbies, you can be very lonely. You can have a very lonely existence on the police department.
You bet. And I, personally, my non-scientific opinion of exactly what you're saying, and man, we're on the same frequency with that for sure. I think that every time you have something like that, and every time that we saw, unattended deaths, so maybe they're not homicides, but we got to figure it out, determine that they're not. But we're seeing bodies all the time, all the time, and then also, like when you're in a van and you're on your way to a drug raid, and there's going to be armored guard on the door, and there's a pit bull inside, and there's probably kids, and your heart starts beating, and the adrenaline starts going. Every time that happens, I think it takes a toll on you. Every time a flashbang goes off at your feet, I think it does, has an effect on your brain. And I wasn't in the military, and I would never compare it to military service because I can't. However, over the course of 25, 30 years or more, this is like a cumulative process. All of these things we see, all these people that spit at us, all the noise and the gunshots and all that stuff, it takes a toll on you eventually. I believe that.
Yeah, there's a lot of positivity on the police department, but there's also a lot of negativity. And hopefully the people that survive are the ones that see the glass as half full rather than half empty, because there's no one on this earth that complains more than cops. They are professional complainers. They live to complain. They love to complain. And maybe that's a good thing, because when
what we do.
They're complaining, it's almost like therapeutic. Oh, this job sucks. This sucks.
Well, if we were firemen, you see, we'd eat till we're tired and then we'd sleep till we're hungry. But we're not, so we complain.
We're gonna have some fire department haters. Some of the things, Jim, when we talk about it, I go twice a year to the World Trade Center physical. And one of them is for treatment, and one of them is they just talk to you. And there's this like 15 or 20 page thing they make you fill out. And like, I'm okay with it. I don't have any psychological problems from that day, even though I did. I watched the towers come down. I searched for bodies, all that stuff. But I'm okay with I'm okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm okay with it. I didn't do anything above and beyond that anyone else didn't do. But, some of the bodies and the things I saw after that, I think I had 17 years on the job when, in 2001. And I had seen a lot of homicides. I'd seen a lot of dead bodies. I had never seen bodies in that condition ever in my life. And I worked at the morgue for a little bit. I wasn't assigned there, but during the whole time of the World Trade Center, maybe I worked at the morgue 5 or 6 times. And I saw the bodies that they brought in, and it was horrific. And I'll always remember that.
I can only imagine, man. I can only imagine what you saw that day. It's probably quite different from anything I've ever seen. But I just, man, you're racking up points with me right now. Just your humble nature and the fact that you said you didn't do anything over and above that anybody else didn't do. Man, that kind of stuff endears you to me. I just love that kind of team mentality. I really like it.
Well, that's I was also a lot part of the team mentality. It was an anti-crime team, which was the plainclothes precinct teams and citywide teams. That was at one time really the pride of the NYPD. They disbanded it over all this bullshit politics. Was one of the most effective crime-fighting units on the precinct and citywide level. And I always believed in that team concept. You work together and no one gets hurt, because we're much better than the perps. We're trained. We know how to do this shit. They don't. They're just street mutts, And so if you work as a team in anti-crime, no one's going to get hurt. Look, there's always going to be someone who's going to get hurt, but your goal is that no one ever gets hurt because you're trained. You're trained soldiers out there, and these mutts are not. And can they get lucky and get a lucky shot off and kill somebody? Or, well, I shouldn't even call it lucky, but yeah. So, we always think that, we're better. And then the other team concept thing is law enforcement should work as a team. We've been covering this Gilgo case, and it didn't really get going until a retired NYPD chief of detectives took over Suffolk County Police and created the Gilgo Beach Task Force. 2 months later, they had the identified who wasn't identified for 12 years before this. So
that's
teamwork.
Awesome.
And part of the team was Suffolk County Detectives, Suffolk County DA's office, FBI, State Police, Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, 5 law enforcement entities. You think something's going to happen when you all work together like that? You bet. And it did.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to look that case up as soon as we get off it because I want to learn about it. But isn't it, that the anti-crime teams that NYPD put out, I'm sure you know this, but there was a model for teams nationwide. I was on one at Mount Clemens PD in early 90s. But that's what they did. They took some uniformed cops who were motivated that wanted to do a little bit more and I was elbowing people, get out of my way. I want to be first in line for this. And they modeled it off after that, basically. And then we kind of figured it out on our own, what worked and so forth. But I didn't mention that in the book because it was a short period of time, 3 to 6 months I spent doing that. But that was because that was straight out of NYPD's playbook. And it worked great. I loved it.
That's cool. I like that. One of the things with anti-crime is what you said, the first word, you need motivated cops that really want to do it. Not the kind that got 6 months to retirement and they're trying to coast and hide because they're in plain clothes.
Or 6 years, right?
Yeah, they can go into a bar and hang out. You need motivated cops. And also cops that realize there's a whole different technique to working in plain clothes as compared to uniform. Nothing used to drive me more crazy when I was an anti-crime sergeant is when someone showed up to work in a football jersey. And I was like, I guess you're not looking to make an arrest. Why don't you just, when the perp sees you and, there's number 70.
I know guys that did that every day.
I used to get the football jersey the fuck off and don't wear a football jersey to work unless you don't intend to make an arrest.
Yeah. There's a guy I'm thinking of, I won't say his name, but he wore one every day. He wore one every day except when he took a basketball jersey and put a t-shirt under it. That was his thing. My man did not last too long on that team. So, but isn't it interesting, like the team concept that as I look back, I was on a team my whole life. I've been so fortunate to be on good teams. Wasn't ever the star player, man, but from high school football to through college right into the police department, I've always been on good teams. And I looking back, I really appreciate that.
Another copism, you never want to be too good or too bad.
Yeah.
It's funny how these
don't draw attention.
expressions come to your mind. They're so funny, I mean, there was the one famous one is a good cop never gets hungry, cold, all horny on his tour of duty because
I've
the
heard
tour of
that.
duty, if you're a good cop, you can take care of all three of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I was also told early on to watch out for the three B's, which are booze, broads, and brutality. Don't get caught up in any of that stuff, or that'll hurt you. So,
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
So you've been with you were on three different departments, and you retired as
Two.
what rank? Two different departments.
Well, with Mount Clemens, I was 6 years a patrolman, 7 years a sergeant, and 2 years a lieutenant. And along the way there, I had different assignments. Anti-crime, since we're talking about it, as a patrolman. Then I was on the SWAT team as a patrolman and a sergeant. Got made lieutenant, and I was off. Narcotics for 3 years, assigned out to a state police task force called Comet in Southeast Michigan, and I was a detective sergeant there. So that all happened within 15 years, from 1990 to 05, and then this 113-year-old police department, close Detroit on the east side, right there, disbanded its police department by a vote of the city council, 4-3, to save money. They contracted the sheriff. Just terrible idea. Just terrible. But the sheriff offered me a job.
Now, Jim, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
You bet.
Didn't a department in Detroit have a problem paying their police, and then also reneged on pensions? Was that in Detroit?
DPD reneged on medical coverage for their retirees after the mayor Kwame Kilpatrick robbed the city blind. I mean, robbed it. I mean, he was. They should have. I think they might have charged him with RICO because he was just nothing but a thug. He's a crime boss, and all of this money, millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, went out the window to contractors that he had an in with, and this was the main drag on the city of Detroit. And as a result, instead of going to the Detroit Institute of Arts and selling every Van Gogh in it until they paid, they could pay for their pensioners, which I thought they should have done. Instead, they yanked medical coverage for all retirees and their families. So you retire at, 50 or something like that, and you got to wait till 65 before you get Medicare. You got nothing. God does my taxes, retired DPD sergeant from number 5, 5th precinct. He had his wife was sick, and he had to pay $1,800 a month in medical insurance premiums just to get her covered. And so I think that might be what you're referring to. So they did do that. But that being said, I'm not trying to rag on DPD because I love DPD. I've had nothing but positive experiences for 30 years with DPD. They were always very in tune with, interdepartment cooperation, and they're very generous with their intelligence if you need it. Great department, really is. It's a shame that happened, but it did.
It's in this whole world we live in now too. It's been really for at least the last probably 10 years, the whole defund the police movement and the police of the enemy movement. It's really a disturbing trend, and you still see remnants of it today. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, a social influencer, let's use that term,
Sure.
put out that he was going to give away PlayStations at Union Square Park at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Friday. And he puts this on social media. So instead of a couple of hundred people showing up, 6,000 people showed up in anticipation of this giveaway, which never happened. Riots. And the police were so overwhelmed, getting bottles thrown at them. And all the big bosses, you see all the white shirts, no helmets, they're getting shit thrown at them. And then, all that said is, the police did such a good job with restraint. How about the fact that they're having bottles and all kinds of shit to being attacked? Why is the restraint the number one thing you're focused on? It's just baffling to me. And even the chief of the department who was on the scene got hit in the head with a bottle or a can, and he's regurgitating the same nonsense. That needed to be taken down. But Friday afternoon at 2:00, they call a mobilization. Cops can't get there for an hour and a half to 2 hours because traffic is at a standstill at Friday afternoon at 2. So they're on their own till the cavalry gets there. The cavalry's not getting there because they're stuck in traffic.
Do you remember? I'm sure you do remember. how tough it was to get a job as a cop back in the day. I remember
Yeah.
showing up for one particular test on Metro Detroit. It was at a high school. 600 people showed up to write that test. There were people, I was in the cafeteria, but the gymnasium was full, the library, 600 people for, I don't know, 6 spots or something like that. And of course, now that same department probably couldn't get 60 applicants, and half of those people wouldn't pass a background or a psych. And so I think what's happening as a result of this defund the police that you mentioned, and that whole paradigm shift in our industry, is that a lot of good men and women who would have brought their talents and their integrity to our line of work are no longer applying. Who can blame them, especially when there's no pension for them or anything like that? So they're off doing what we should have done, was make money, but they're not there. So what you're getting is people who are making it through, who probably would have been beaten out previously competitively, on the exams. They just wouldn't have made it. They wouldn't have scored high enough. Well, now they're the top of the class, and you're dragging along with them people who maybe wouldn't have passed a background before, but we're letting off a little bit on that because we need the bodies. And I think I was told this by someone I really respected. He said the problem, this was in 2020 with all the peaceful protests and all that crap. He said to me, he goes, the problem isn't going to be seen for a few years. He goes, but Jimmy, 5 years from now, we're going to start having people that have integrity problems. We're going to start having people that, can't resist temptation or can't handle the freedom to make decisions, that type of thing. That's where it's coming down the road, because what's going on now is going to result in what I just described, and it has. And so unfortunately, I see problems maybe coming our way in the not too distant future.
No, absolutely. And something, the other thing is lowering the standards. On the NYPD, they just made it that you don't have to finish the 1.5-mile run at the end of the academy. What good can that possibly do except let some overweight people get through the training? How is that a good thing? And
I don't know.
In fact, the police commissioner, Keechant Sewell, who just resigned a couple of months ago, she was 100% against it, and the mayor overruled her. And I think that was one of the reasons probably she left. She was getting overruled with her decisions by not just the mayor, but then there was a deputy mayor, and there was, I think, 2 or 3 levels. Really, a police commissioner, the police commissioner should answer to the mayor, period. No other levels of government. And she didn't like that, and she resigned. And as a result, the NYPD lost a great police commissioner. No one I ever heard said a bad word about her. And she had been the chief of detectives in Nassau County prior to that. So,
oh wow, they now that you said that, I do remember. I read about her when she was hired, because I remember hearing that she came from somewhere where she was a chief of detectives, and then came to the NYPD. And I thought that was very significant to walk into NYPD as a police commissioner and having not worked there previously. That blows my mind. But I think that the form of city government in New York City, which is the same as it is in Detroit. By that, I mean the mayor obviously is elected, but the mayor is the chief executive. That automatically sometimes politicizes the departments, like the police department and the fire department. Because right now, all of a sudden, you've got a person who can call shots and change your plans, who's elected and who has constituents and influencers and donors to deal with. The opposite being, or the alternate being, most cities in the state of Michigan anyway are the city manager form of government. They have a mayor and a council, but those people employ the city manager to be the executive. So that in New York and Detroit's the same, with the mayor being political and affecting the police department that easily and thoroughly. That's got to be kind of a bummer if you're the chief.
Yeah, Jim, I've had people on the show, and I've started talking about politics, and the person would say, I don't want to talk politics. I go, dude, stop. Are you kidding me? The P in policing stands for politics. If there's an organization that is more affected by politics than the police, I don't know of it then, No. So stop. You don't want to talk politics.
Or maybe a sheriff's department, the sheriff, but that's about it.
Yeah, because as what was the old expression? When the city council sneezes, the police get pneumonia. So it's just like
that's a good one.
I stole that from something else. That was historical expression. Anyway, it's the politics in policing. I mean, some of the things that they have done to the New York City Police Department are unfathomable, like the diaphragm law. I don't know if you know about that. When a cop
No.
makes an arrest, he's not allowed to put his knee into the back of the perp to restrict the perp's diaphragm. And if the cop does it and gets caught, he can be charged with a misdemeanor and actually arrested. It's so ridiculous. The crew that made that up, they are ridiculous. I mean, I hope they're listening, or if they're not, send it to them. These people don't belong in government. They're absolute, I don't even.
That seems like something you could do accidentally very easily. It seems like that's something you could just, in the normal course of events, you're going to accidentally do that. I've never thought about it like that, but that's ridiculous.
Well, there's really no way to get handcuffs onto someone who doesn't want to be handcuffed unless you put your knee and your body weight on their back. And one of the probably what I would tell a new cop as far as self-defense, enroll in jujitsu classes, because to be able just to neutralize someone till the cavalry gets there is a great thing, because the public sees you using force and they don't like it. They don't like seeing you use force on this bad guy, So
and no matter how justified the use of force is, it always looks bad to someone who doesn't know what's going on, especially on video. If they see the video, they just don't get it. There's no context and there's no backstory. And, even if the person is the worst, murderer in the world, you put that guy in an arm bar, slam him on the hood of a car, somebody's going to get upset about it. It's just something that can't be avoided. So.
Well, even during, you heard the expression during the riots, the peaceful demonstrations of 2020, the peaceful, they said, we want the Blasio, who was the worst mayor probably in the history of the world, not New York City, of the world. And he said to the police department, I want you to have a light touch to these rioters. And now this is how upside down this world is. Not only did they not charge any of them, they got arrested, they were never charged. They sued the city and they all got money.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So how do you work in an environment like that?
I've read about de Blasio all through that time period. I was reading about him and I saw pictures of him in the 70s when he was, he was a hippie, like dropping acid out west or something. I mean, it's hard to believe that guy was the mayor of New York City. It's amazing. Yeah,
and he tried to run for president, but he got less than 1%. It's just crazy. Jim, I want you to tell more about your book, because I mean, we're talking policing and we could do this forever, but I want to talk about what was your greatest challenges as a cop? How did it differ? Is an easy question. How did it differ from going from cop to being a boss, to being a sergeant? I don't know if you know, at NYPD, another thing is anyone above the rank of sergeant, people call them boss. I don't like to their face, so, hey, boss, And I've never seen any other job where someone would refer to as a ranking, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, chief, boss. It's sort of a weird expression, and I was never that comfortable with it. To use it, or when people said, "Hey, boss," I felt like it was. It sort of makes you feel good in one way, but it's sort of a strange thing to refer to someone as boss.
I have a friend named Anthony who's from the Bronx, New York City, and born and raised, and came out here for a woman and who he married and then got divorced from, but he stayed, and I'm glad he did because he's such a good guy. But I remember when I made lieutenant, he called me Lou. And I looked around. What'd you say? Hey, Lou. And that's my dad's name. I'm like, he doesn't even know my dad. It took me like a good 90 seconds to figure out that he meant lieutenant, and it was a New York City thing. Right. But no, when they don't use that in Michigan? No.
Oh, wow.
Don't hear that one very often. So that was so funny. It stuck with me though. And when I got promoted first to sergeant, I was again very fortunate because I was sent to a shift with a lieutenant named Harry Reynolds, who, they sent me to a couple schools, basic supervision, advanced supervision, and you learn and you listen and you can apply some of it. But it was Harry Reynolds who really gave me a model of how to take a group of people and lead them towards a common goal. And that's really what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to, you have your goals set by the department, by the chief of police, whatever, and you have to lead this group of people towards that. And I learned that you have to get to know those people, those cops on the street, because, and you already know them. It's not that big of a department, but but I mean, you need to know their strengths so that you can put them in positions to succeed. You need to know their weaknesses so that you can train them up. You need to make sure their equipment's good. You know, cars are running. You need to do inspections now and then. Make sure that people, you know, guns are clean and, you know, there's a round in the chamber and all that kind of stuff. You got their vests on. You need to do all of these things, and there's much more to it than that even, so that you can ultimately lead them to where you want them to go. And I found that because Harry taught me this, it's tougher when you get promoted. It's not easier. You know, you get 3 stripes on your sleeve. That doesn't mean you put your feet on the desk or gold bars on your collar. That's not what it means. It means the opposite of that. And I've always thought since that time that the foundation of good leadership is humility, because ultimately when you're doing all that stuff I just said, you're serving those people, and you have to put their needs in front of your own. And isn't that really the definition of being humble? So I think humility as the foundation of leadership is something that I learned. It took me a little while. Didn't happen all at one time, but over time, that's what I learned when I got promoted. And I tried to always model that.
You know, Jim, that was very well said. And humility, absolutely. And people think a lot of times, oh, those stripes went to his head. I've heard that bullshit before,
Yeah.
you know. No, it's a different role that you play. And
Absolutely.
It took me maybe about a month or two to realize after I got promoted that my main job as a boss, as a sergeant, was to keep cops out of trouble, to protect them from themselves. That was, I mean, and I'm sure, you know, I maybe not saying it the correct way, but I figured out, you know, something. I'm here to make sure this guy doesn't do stupid shit that's going to get him in trouble. That's my whole job, you know? Like the cop, this one cop one time smacked someone in front of a crowd of like 50 people on the Upper West Side, all of a political persuasion. It wasn't right, I'll put it that way. He smacked someone, and I'm right there, and I'm like, oh no, how am I going to explain this one? And they're like, Sergeant, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to discipline him. And the only discipline was I tore him a new one privately. But like, what are you doing? What made you think you could smack someone? In this day and age, they want him arrested, you know?
Absolutely.
And I was like, what made you think you could smack someone in front of 50 people? Like, what are you thinking, you know? Oh, so sorry, Sarge. You know, sorry, I won't do it again. Yeah, okay. Resume patrol.
I pulled a lady over one time. She had some, I don't know. She had at least one baby in the car. Maybe it was more. I was brand new. I was 23 years old, man. Just off FTO. I pulled her over. She doesn't have her. She's speeding. She don't have her seatbelt on. You know, she had a suspended license. So I'm still figuring things out. I got the book to guide me what I should do. According to the book, what I should do in reality, I had her step out of the car for a minute. I forget why, but I had her step out of the car, and she flipped out because her babies were in the car. I mean, I didn't take her to jail. I didn't even put her in my car. I just had her outside of the car. She got very upset about that. I ended up writing her like a seatbelt ticket and nothing else. And she calls the station to complain about me. And she's just in my sergeant, Danny Fields, answers the phone, and he listens to her. And during the time that he's on the phone with her, I had come into the station to do something, and he kind of gives me the wink. And so I stuck around, and I listened as she complained and called me every name in the book, said she was going to a city council meeting and blah, 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 whatever. She's going to really, you know, light me up and cause a big scene. And so he listens, lets her get it all out. And then he says, did you have a suspended license? I'm looking at the preliminary report here, which was bullshit. It says you have a suspended license. Well, that's beside the point. I had my children in the car and we were going to the doctor, blah, blah, blah. He's like, all right. He says, well, we're just going to leave it at, you know, as a seatbelt ticket. He didn't write you speeding, and he didn't arrest your car. He didn't arrest you like he should have. And he didn't tow your car as he should have. And I got to tell you, man, he's going to be in a lot of trouble for this. When he comes in off the road, I'm gonna counsel him, but then I'm gonna, you know, he's gonna get written up. He's gonna get some serious discipline. I don't know. He may even be fired. And she backed away. She's like, whoa, hold on a second. I didn't mean that he should be fired. I just meant that I was really upset. So he talked her right off the ledge and just flipped the tables on her and made it go away. And that's what he was doing. He was keeping me out of trouble, right? So
there's an art to that. You know, there used to be an expression in the street crime unit that you know, they would toss 30, 40, 50 people a night for guns. And they would say, leave them with a good taste in their mouth. You know, after you ruffle their feathers, you know, calm them down, say, listen, I'm sorry. You fit the description of a guy wanted for a robbery with a gun. You all right? I didn't mean to scare you, blah, blah, blah. And then they walk away okay. But if you're like, hey, listen, motherfucker, I'm the police, that doesn't fly, And now you
I
just
couldn't
made
agree more.
yourself enemies, So
Yeah,
there
man.
is,
That's
that's
how
an
you do
art
it.
form, like just what you explained that your boss did for you. That's an art form on how to leave someone and use psychology. What did they used to call it in the academy? Transactional analysis.
Ooh, never heard
I
that one.
used to love that.
Never heard that one.
Yeah.
I heard the verbal judo. I heard that, but
Oh
never
yeah,
that
that
one.
verbal, that's another one. Or hook your child, right?
Yeah.
Because when you get mad, supposedly you're acting like a child, right? So
Oh,
you were talking about humility. It's very similar to that, where someone could be like, curse you up and down. You go, yeah, okay, thank you. Have a nice day.
yeah.
But meanwhile, it's eating you up inside, and you may be taught to do that, or somehow use verbal judo and de-escalate the situation that's up here and sort of take the air out of it a little bit and de-escalate. And a lot of those things, if you're talented, you can do a lot of that with your voice, And
Sure.
that's why I think cops are at a disadvantage too with the body worn video, because sometimes you can use your voice also to scare the shit out of somebody, and now you may be
And you should.
reluctant to do that because it's recorded.
Right.
Oh, you're not supposed to use that language, officer. We're going to find you discourtesy.
Yeah.
So
I got pulled in a couple times to internal affairs for some complaint, and I just said, "Listen, Lieutenant." There's this one guy, I won't say his name, but he tried to jam me up a couple of times. But I just said I was speaking. I said what I said, and I don't regret it. And I did it purposefully. I seemed angry, but I really wasn't. I was just trying to speak language that this guy would understand. That's it. And that's true. That's exactly what I was trying to do. I don't think he believed me, but
yeah, but sometimes when people are removed from the street, they forget what it's like, and maybe they were never on the street, and they don't know the issues you have and how you do certain things to stay safe. I don't think people in internal affairs, many of them, that's why they started kidnapping people on the NYPD, because internal affairs used to be all volunteer and you got the worst of the worst. Then they started kidnapping people that did not want to go there so they could get quality candidates, but it didn't make the people that were kidnapped happy, and then they would have to stay
I
there.
know a guy. I could think of him. We went to the academy together. Right out of the academy, they took this guy's side and they told him they blew sunshine at him about it. What a good investigator they thought he was going to make and all this kind of stuff. And all it was, they were trying to get him to go to IA. And he did.
Right.
I don't think he stayed, but he did go.
Well, I think when in New York City, if they pull you into IAB, you have to stay there, I think, for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And then allegedly you can pick your spot where to go after that, because they forced you to go a place that you did not want to go. But
that reminds me of an episode of NYPD Blue, which was the greatest show ever made, next to Adam 12. And there was a guy who was in IA, and it was in season 1 because Kelly was still a character, and he played the bagpipes, and I played the bagpipes, and so it stuck with me. But they said he and Kelly are sitting in the cemetery, and he's got his bagpipes, and he always wanted to be in the NYPD pipes and drums, and they wouldn't let him because he was in IA, and they took him into IA early, and he could never get out, and his reputation was ruined with all the guys, and it was just a great scene. But
yeah, you know what? To me, and I know you said NYPD Blue is your favorite cop show. To me, HBO The Wire was the most amazing cop show I have ever seen. And
really good.
Not only did they get the whole feel of what it's like to be a cop, but they got the language of the street down. Whoever the writers were, they got the lingo of the perps, I was like, this is great. You feel me? I mean, the language, the writers were fantastic. And that show, I remember they did a scene. I think it was McNulty, or one of them was retiring, and it was in a bar, and everybody was there and they're playing the bagpipes, and it just caught the real feeling. I was almost like in tears watching this.
Yeah.
The real feeling of what it was like to leave the job, and even though you were ready to leave, they caught the emotion of it. And that's to me whether that show was just incredible. Jim, we just passed an hour, and I usually try to quit. I want to read just the last paragraph of your acknowledgments. And then, like I do on every show, I give you the last words and you can say whatever you'd like to say. And, it's almost like we're talking about your book. And of course, your book it's available on Amazon. It's Echoes in Eternity Street Cop Stories. And I think we told a lot of stories without even necessarily telling your stories. We just, because two cops get together and we can just probably talk forever. And God forbid we had a couple of Coronas on each side of this.
Right.
We'd be here for days. But I'm sure, you have a million stories and I hope you keep writing. It's a great thing to keep doing. And also it's therapeutic, playing the bagpipes. I play guitar. You have to have other outlets besides telling war stories in the local tavern, better off telling them on a book than telling them to people in the bar, Anyway, I'm going to reduce the acknowledgments in Jim's book. Again, the book is called Echoes in Eternity Street Cop Stories. Looking back on the stories in this book, I realized what a small fraction of my career they actually represent. The stories I didn't write would supply a few sequels, not to mention all the stuff I can't remember. I wish I'd kept a journal. I feel the same way. Many of the names, places, and descriptions in this book were changed to protect certain identities. I hope you enjoyed these authentic adventures and that the profanity wasn't too egregious. Believe it or not, I kept it to a minimum. That's great.
That's true. Yeah.
Your final thoughts. And by the way, just stay around when we end just for a few minutes. I want to talk to you after we finish this episode.
Okay. Well, the book, like I said, is it's a collection of true crime stories. Everything in the book is true. Some of the names have been changed to protect, innocent parties and some other people for other reasons. But everything in you read there actually happened. And it's like I say, it's roughly chronological, start to finish, but each chapter is a different story. So it's an easy book to read, I think. I've been told that anyway. You can necessarily pick it up and put it down. Although I've also been told that it's tough to put down, and I'm thrilled when I hear that kind of feedback. So I hope that people would consider taking a look at it. It's available on Amazon. It just search Echoes in Eternity. It'll come right up. Actually, if you just Google search Echoes in Eternity, it'll come right up on Amazon. It's also on Barnes & Noble, Walmart.com, a couple others. But and then I have a website called echoesbook.com. That's my own website. And I would never discourage people from ordering Amazon. You can save some money on shipping. But if you get it from echoesbook.com, you have to pay shipping, but I'll sign it for you and I'll script it however you'd like. And so, Bill, man, this is only like my third podcast. I'm new to this whole thing. The book just came out a few months ago, and far and away, this is the coolest thing I've done yet related to this book. Thank you so much, man. It's just such
Jim,
a pleasure.
Thank you for coming on. And as I said before we went on the air, I said, Jim, it's just like having a conversation. And as long as you just make it conversational, people like to listen to it, because cops have great stories, and we tell great stories. And do you have some Irish blood in you?
I do. I have a grandfather from Ireland. He passed away when I was 8 years old, but I remember him. And I also have a grandfather from Scotland. But like anybody else in America, I'm a mix. I've got lots of other stuff too.
So you got the Blarney, so you can talk for hours, right? So you got
right.
you got it there. Folks, this has been Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories, the Law and Crime Author Series. And the author tonight has been, or this afternoon, or whenever you watch this, has been James Disser, Echoes in Eternity. I can't even talk. Echoes in Eternity Street Cop Stories by James Disser. And it's available on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold. Jim, thank you so much for coming on the show. And good luck with your book and good luck with the rest of your life. And God bless.
Same to you, sir. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it so much.
One episode just ain't enough.